Imagine an island where killing a king could be justified for the sake of a fruit. Imagine land that was plowed, poisoned with chemicals, and cleared for an entire century, all for a single crop. And imagine that this crop is the very same one now sitting in your refrigerator or garnishing a cocktail on your vacation. Pineapple. Sweet, yellow, seemingly innocent. Now hold on to that feeling of innocence, because by the end of this video, it will be gone for good. Today, Hawaii is synonymous with paradise, palm trees, volcanoes, surfing, aloha. But few people stop to consider that the islands we see on postcards are not a natural landscape. They are an industrial facility, and it wasn't nature that created it, but commerce. One plant, quite literally, rewrote the map, the economy, the culture, and even the political system of an entire nation. And this story didn't begin with a paradise fruit. It began with the cold calculations of a handful of American businessmen who looked at fertile volcanic soil and saw not a home for people, but a free factory. Let's start with something almost nobody knows. The pineapple is not a plant that grew naturally in Hawaii. It isn't even from the Pacific at all. The pineapple's homeland is South America, somewhere between what is now Brazil and Paraguay. It was only brought to Hawaii in the 19th century, and the earliest attempts at cultivation were so modest that no economist of the time would have bet a single cent on this plant. No one could have imagined that within a few decades, this very fruit would help destroy the entire way of life of the native Hawaiian people. But the detail that changed everything, which we'll get to shortly, is tied to one businessman whose name now appears on every can of pineapple rings in the supermarket. Keep that in mind. Soon you'll understand why he turned a tropical fruit into a weapon of economic conquest. Now, some context without which this story makes no sense. In 1893, a group of American businessmen, mostly descendants of missionaries and sugar planters, organized a coup against the legitimate Hawaiian monarch, Queen Liliuokalani. This isn't a metaphor or an exaggeration. It was, quite literally, an armed overthrow of the monarchy, backed by American warships in the harbor. The Kingdom of Hawaii, which had existed as a recognized independent state with its own government, diplomatic relations, and even embassies in Europe, was dismantled. And this wasn't done for some abstract notion of democracy. It was done for the land, for control over the harvests, for a market they themselves planned to create. Here's where a question arises that I want you to hold on to until the end of this video. Why did the pineapple, of all things, become the symbol and engine of this takeover, rather than some other crop? After all, sugarcane was already being grown on the islands, and it was sugar, not pineapple, that first attracted the planters. What made businesses switch to a yellow, spiky fruit that was practically unknown to American consumers at the time? Think about it as we continue. The answer will surprise you. The key figure in this story was a man named James Drummond Dole. Yes, that Dole, the same name now printed on canned goods in every American supermarket. Dole arrived in Hawaii in 1898, almost immediately after the fall of the monarchy, when land that had once belonged to the crown and the native people had fallen into the hands of a new government controlled by the very same conspirators. He saw an opportunity no one else had taken to scale up pineapple cultivation, not as an exotic dessert, but as an industrial canned product for the American mainland. This decision proved both brilliant and catastrophic. Why brilliant? Because canning solved the pineapple's main problem, how quickly it spoiled. A fresh fruit couldn't survive weeks at sea to the mainland without rotting, but a canned one could sit for years. Dole built what was, at the time, the largest cannery in the world on the island of Oahu, and within just a few years, the island of Lanai, one of the 8 main Hawaiian islands, was transformed almost entirely into one continuous pineapple plantation, owned by a single company. Picture it, an entire island where people live becomes, in essence, the private agricultural property of one corporation. Lanai even earned the unofficial nickname Pineapple Island, a name that was literal to an almost unsettling degree. Now, a fact that shocks even those who think they know the history of colonialism well. To supply the plantations with cheap labor, Dole's company and other major planters brought tens of thousands of migrant workers to the islands, from Japan, the Philippines, China, Portugal, and Korea. These were people recruited under contracts that often amounted to something very close to indentured servitude. Workers lived in settlements deliberately segregated by ethnicity, a design meant to prevent solidarity and potential strikes. This wasn't a side effect of the industry, it was a deliberate management strategy. Divide and rule, applied literally to barracks and housing blocks. The demographic makeup of modern Hawaii, with its remarkable ethnic diversity now marketed as one of the state's cultural strengths, is a direct, non-accidental consequence of the pineapple and sugar industries, which deliberately mixed and separated people to control the labor force. And now it's time to reveal the secret I promised at the very start. Remember the question, why pineapple and not sugar, became the true engine of the island's economic and political transformation? The answer is that sugar had already been claimed by the old elite, planter families who had controlled that market for years and kept newcomers out. Pineapple, on the other hand, was an open niche. Dole and his partners deliberately chose a crop no one had yet monopolized, precisely because it let them build an entirely new, parallel power structure without competing against the old money of the sugar industry. The pineapple wasn't just a fruit, it was a tool for building a new oligarchy from scratch on freshly seized territory. By the mid-20th century, Hawaii was producing up to 80% of all canned pineapple in the world. Consider that number. Nearly the entire global market depended on a handful of islands in the Pacific. This made Hawaii extraordinarily wealthy, but that wealth was distributed with extreme inequality, concentrated in the hands of a small circle of families known in Hawaiian history as the Big Five, five corporations that effectively controlled the island's economy, politics, and even the press for decades. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn that few people see coming. In the second half of the 20th century, the very same globalization that had once made Hawaii a monopolist of the pineapple market turned against it. New producers emerged, the Philippines, Thailand, and later Costa Rica, where land, and especially labor, cost a fraction as much. The Hawaiian companies that had built the global supply system themselves became its victims. Production began shifting rapidly away from the islands to poorer countries where the same work could be done for pennies. This story reached its climax in the 1990s, when Dole officially closed the last major plantations in Hawaii and moved production abroad. The island of Lanai, that same pineapple island that had spent decades as a monoculture factory under single corporate ownership, was left with virtually no economic reason to exist. Thousands of workers lost their jobs overnight. An entire community, artificially created a century earlier for the sake of growing pineapples, suddenly became irrelevant the moment the economy decided it was more profitable to grow the fruit elsewhere. The island built for a fruit was, in turn, abandoned by that fruit. And here's the final, unexpected twist few people expect at the end of this story. Today, Hawaii, birthplace of the world's most famous canned pineapple brand, produces essentially zero pineapple for its own canning exports. The market the islands themselves created, dominated for decades, and for which they toppled a monarchy, relocated tens of thousands of people, and reshaped the demographics of an entire state. That market abandoned Hawaii just as coldly as it had once arrived. The industry that once justified a coup ultimately proved just as indifferent to Hawaii itself as to any other spot on the map. The curse of the pineapple wasn't that the fruit deliberately brought the islands misfortune. The curse was that the same logic of unlimited profit, which once decided to seize the land for the sake of a plant, eventually decided, with equal indifference, to abandon that land too. So, what really happened to Hawaii? Is this a story of conquest for the sake of a fruit? Or a story about how capital always finds a new victim the moment the old one stops being profitable? And if an ordinary pineapple was able to redraw the political map of an entire nation, force the relocation of tens of thousands of people, and even justify the overthrow of a monarchy, are you ready to find out which other products in your kitchen right now carry a similarly hidden history of deception, power struggles, or outright fraud? For example, did you know that almost everything sold as truffle oil in ordinary stores has no connection to real truffles whatsoever? In the next video, we'll break down why this oil is 100% industrial fake, and who's making billions off the deception.